And what's up? We are live. This is the 10th week of the college football review. I came in a little late today only because I attended a game last week. We didn't have a show. So, and the reason why is because I attended another game. I was down in Miami watching Miami take on Florida State. So I could not do the show. It was a virtual impossibility. And then rushing back to Jacksonville for Sunday, a lot of things went on. Anyway, a lot has gone on today. I didn't get a chance to watch a lot of games only because I was en route to the Florida Georgia game or I was at the Florida Georgia game. But in any event, I tried keeping up with the scores. So that's something I'm going to try to get into tonight, trying to keep up with the scores, trying to keep up with what's going on, in addition to being on the road watching the Georgia Florida game. And yes, Georgia, Florida, not Florida, Georgia. Georgia was the home team this year, and they win the game 34-20. A very eventful game. Surprise, surprise. I thought it would be, well, not eventful at all because Florida hasn't played well this year. Georgia's played well, but on occasion, it seems there's been inconsistency there. But the last time we saw Georgia, they were in Austin, Texas, taking on the number one team in the country and giving them a beating, teaching them a lesson to the point to where they jumped back to being the number two team in the country. And with the bye week before the Florida game, I guess it took a little bit of the intensity off of the team, even though this is a rivalry game between them and the Gators, which started back in 1933. Carson Beck, the reason for the season or the reason for the end of the season. Watching him today throw more picks again in person. So it's, as you may know, when you go to games, it's a lot different than being on television or watching through television, especially if you have seats that are a little higher. That way you can see the entire field and see the penalties and that you don't necessarily see while watching television. And you also get to see the receivers and how wide open they really are and how the plays do develop and the time lapse of those plays where you believe people of these high caliber levels of talent should be able to deliver these balls, or if your receiver catch these balls running these patterns and routes. Well, it just hasn't been that way for Carson Beck going into the season. They were, I mean, they, as in the media, were trying to make him a Heisman Trophy candidate, probably because he fits the measurables, probably because they thought being on the number one team in the country going into the season, the Georgia Bulldogs, he automatically should have been in the running. He wasn't Stetson Bennett, an underdog, undersized underdog who overachieved and won two national championships on the road, at least led the Georgia Bulldogs to two national championships in a row, even though defense was a highlight of what he was doing, but his offense still, that's something to talk about because Stetson Bennett was legitimately good. So if you want to come in tonight, you can do so. I will invite you to do just that. I will put the link in the description, I guess, and send it out for you on all the platforms we're on today, whether it's our Sports Bag Bros podcast, our Southern Football Nation platform, or just coming to the YouTube feed and doing that. So if you want to come in, take advantage of that. It seems like someone did take advantage of it. They happen to be here. And guess who it is? Scott the G, not at the bar, being disruptive as he was the last time around. The TV is not blaring in the background either, as it was before. He's coming in with a new set of manners, decorum, civility.
Yeah.
How
Yeah,
about
that
it?
was fun last time. It was not disruptive. That was fun time.
You. Fun for you.
I was
But
in the heart. That's why I could still get along with all those Georgia fans, and they were who were they beating, like Texas or Alabama or something like that.
well, Georgia did beat Texas. They went to Austin a couple of weeks ago. They had a
That's right.
bye week
Yeah,
this past week. They beat on the Gators today, but it was an entertaining game for the Gators today, by the way. I thought the
yeah,
Gators brought more to it, even though it is a rivalry. But looking on paper, they're supposed to have been overmatched. You know what's going on behind the scenes with Billy Napier likely not coming back after this season. This could have helped out if he would have beaten Georgia, because it looks like they're going to beat Florida State. Knocking down two rivals could be a reason why he could stay around. But I think the decision is already made. It's good theater going into what they were doing today and seeing how it turned out. It started off well, but it started off well because Carson Beck wasn't good again. 3 interceptions, giving the Gators every opportunity to try to pull off the
yeah.
upset.
And I
Carson
think
Beck, I'm saying Carson Beck is not a Heisman Trophy candidate. Carson Beck is not a very good quarterback. I think he may be average at best. He just happens to be on a team that's, well, one of the best teams in the country, and certainly has a roster to prove that they're among the best teams in the country. Looks like he froze up here for a bit, but in that case, I'll continue to talk because I'm just getting back from the Florida Gators playing the Georgia Bulldogs here in Jacksonville. So I'm getting back from that game just now. That's why I could not start at 9 o'clock as I had planned, stuck in traffic coming back from the game. So let's see how this goes here. There you go again. What's going on?
hey,
I don't know what happened
yeah,
over there, but
yeah,
I was just saying I was stuck in traffic. I was going to start this at 9 o'clock, but got caught up in traffic. But this was a better Gator team today. But Carson Beck did everything to try to help them look better than what they really were. And I think snake bitten between DJ Lagley getting injured. I don't know the extent of his injury because we didn't get it, hear about it. Obviously, we're not watching television, so we didn't get what his injury was. And then you bring in a freshman, and what was his name? Aiden. What's his name? But anyway, God, I was watching Aiden Warner. He comes in and plays just like a freshman that wasn't ready against a top defense, even though they're coming off of a bye week.
yeah. That was Lagway was looking good, and wasn't I? They were saying on TV, they kept saying like Georgia had the best defense in the nation.
Georgia certainly does have one of the best defenses in the nation. I don't know about overall, but after the way, if you look, I don't even go by the stats too much anymore, anyways, because this deep in the season, you know who's legitimate and how they're doing it, and who's not legitimate and how they're doing it. Army has one of the best defenses as well, but if they're in the SEC, they're probably not doing as well as Vanderbilt. So
Right.
looking at what Georgia is doing and how they're doing it and when they're doing it, because they did it against Texas on the road, when I believe everyone outside of Bulldog Nation didn't think so, including myself. I thought they would lose by certainly more than the 5 points they were the underdog by. And they put a beating on Texas in Texas as if Texas did not belong in that game.
Yeah, DJ Lagway, I thought he looked good. You know, not great. He's still kind of raw, but yeah, it was really producing. You know, early on, and then his hamstring. You know, I guess he got a hamstring pull or strain or whatever,
Okay.
and they took him out for the rest of the game. And then Skippy McGee came in, like I said, fresh from the Yale chess team, and he, you know, for a guy who's not bad, not bad. You know, I mean, he had a couple of drives there. He kept them in the game. He also threw a couple of costly interceptions. But I mean, for a guy who's never really played at a competitive level anymore, I thought he did pretty good. And I think his name is actually Aiden Warner.
Aiden
But
Warner, he's a freshman himself. He threw an
right,
interception.
right.
But looking at what he was doing, being there, I know it's not too much different than what's on television. If he threw an interception in person, you would have seen that same interception on the television. But watching him play in person, I didn't think he did a good job at all. I
Oh,
think that he had no clue out there, and you probably wouldn't expect a freshman to have a clue. and especially a freshman that's not getting the reps in practice, because in the beginning it was Graham Mertz and it was DJ Lagway, until now DJ Lagway is in there because of Mertz's season-ending injury, and he probably would have taken his job anyways. But looking at Aiden Warner today, the running game is what kept them in. It was not him at all. Seeing the blitz come, and he identifies it, but he could not react to it. He couldn't hit the hot receiver. When they rolled him out, he panicked when they kept coming after him. It was just too fast for him. And it showed, but that running game kept him in check. And then Carson Beck kept them in the game as a whole.
Yeah, Beck definitely had a tough day, and threw a lot of them up for grabs. And the Gator defense, this was the best game of the season by far, I think, for them in terms of even the secondary, the interceptions, and the way they played, and the front seven were tough. And they got a lot of sacks. So this team really played its guts out. And after DJ Lagway went down, you knew it was tough coming in. And then you lose your top quarterback, and then you've got this guy who played a couple of games. He played a little bit in the Kentucky game, played a little bit against Sanford, just in garbage time. Never up against like a first caliber top team defense like Georgia. And, considering that, and he has gotten some practice reps, obviously, since Graham Mertz went down. So, he knew a couple of things, but I got to give shout outs to our running backs. These are not our starting running backs. Jaden Baugh has been playing some more. He was spectacular. Jacoby Jackson was even more spectacular. And, these are guys like Jacoby Jackson. I've been hearing his name for a while. I haven't experienced him much on the field, but against Georgia, this was. And some of the play calling was just really stupid. He kept going. He liked to do that just right up the gut thing for whatever reason. The Napier or whoever decides to call that, and it just about never works. Whereas you get these guys even a little bit off tackle or have them going, on sweep runs. These guys were just eating it up. Great lateral quickness. Really, really a lot of promise with these guys. And even when you had a guy like Aiden Warner, Skippy McGee, who you knew wasn't going to be a great passer, and Georgia could afford to just stack the box. Whenever we got these guys even a little bit outside the tackles, they were really lighting Georgia up. They did well.
Yeah, they were getting after Georgia, but they did load the box after Lagway went down, and they realized that Aiden Warner could not do anything against them. Really could not do anything. Whether he had a little bit of time because he didn't have a whole lot of time, or whether they tried to roll him out, he wasn't having any real success. He was panicking. He was overthrowing, and it's not like they were wide open anyway. So the windows were smaller, and he was trying to hit the receivers in these windows, and he just was erratic at best. And he didn't run too much himself. Georgia easily were able to take care of him, but it was the running game that was still fairly consistent. In fact, it was pretty consistent. But I think the mistakes Georgia made, the mistakes that Florida made, especially on the field goal that ended up the bad snap going down the field, they lost a lot of rushing yards on that, and it makes the overall statistics look worse than what they really were. But running the ball was effective for them, and the best thing they could have done after Lagway had gone down. Georgia, now that Penn State has lost, Ohio State has won. Penn State was number 3, Georgia still number 2. I don't think it really affects them. I'm thinking if the game had stayed close as it was for most of the game, I think Georgia probably loses that number 2 spot. Or are we deep enough in the season for the people who make these decisions to say, you know what, give them a pass. They're good. They've proven themselves. They're due for a down moment, being emotional from the previous game at Texas, a bye week last week. Now in the rivalry they do have in Florida, as I mentioned already in the beginning of the show, since 1933, Georgia, Florida, Florida, Georgia. And I guess regardless of the score, even if it was a nail biter at the end, Georgia still stays at number 2.
Yeah, and it's, like you said, I think what people will take a look at is Carson Beck and how he did. And, one of the things, I think the quick reaction would be they were looking past the Gators, right? They spent everything, last week against Texas, and then they were kind of looking a little bit beyond Florida, like we got this, because that's what I thought.
I don't think so. I don't think so, only because of the rivalry. Well, if nothing else, the rivalry is the reason why you don't look past it. They know all of these people who come to Jacksonville to see the largest cocktail party in the world. Every year they do that, and they do get up for it. And you can feel the enthusiasm inside the stadium. I was sitting on the Georgia side, even though Florida hasn't had a great season this year, and there's been turmoil off the field, well, behind the scenes, at least with Billy Napier not knowing whether he's going to be here or not. And you know what it's going to be at the end of the season, especially he may be most likely going to be gone. And you still felt that vibe. I've been to a number of these games before the game, during the game, and this game wasn't too much different, with the exception of knowing that, okay, Florida certainly isn't going to do anything this year. They're going to have their issues once this is completely over, and Georgia is probably going to have even more issues. I don't believe they can win a championship with Carson Beck playing the way he's played this season. It's not too different from last season. In fact, he's playing worse now this season than last season, and they didn't win a national championship then. And it had a lot to do with what he brings to the table, which is unfortunately not much other than experience. And what good is that experience if he's only worse now than he was last season?
Yeah, interesting guy. Like we've talked about, he's a Jacksonville guy from Mandarin. And
right.
They were saying he drives like a Lamborghini or Ferrari. He got a bunch of NIL money or something. That's probably the most interesting thing about him is his car. But yeah, he looked vulnerable. His decision making wasn't good. His execution was off, and it's tough to say. I mean, but I want to say back to the looking beyond it game. What you were talking about and what you experienced was from the fans' point of view. And trust and believe that those Georgia Bulldog fans bring that energy hard and heavy every year.
Do.
Even back in the Steve Spurrier days, even back in the Urban Meyer days, years where you knew we were going to smoke them like they knew they were going to smoke us today. Those Georgia fans with all those energy and all those cocktails come to that game so fired up. And I loved it. Because when you know you're going to beat them and they still get up for it that big, it just makes it wonderful. And that's one of the reasons why it's such a good game, because this game, the Florida Georgia in Jacksonville, is so close to what you would think of like an ideal bowl game, because it's kind of an even, it's a neutral sort of territory. And Georgia gets half the tickets, Florida gets half the tickets. So it just makes for a really raucous, rowdy environment. And those Georgia fans, I've been going to that game since, I was in elementary school, and those guys always bring it. Whereas I think the players may have been looking a little bit past this one. Maybe they thought, well, Florida's down. We're going to, we beat Texas. These guys should be a pushover. But like I said, the Gators really put out today. And as much as I criticize Napier's play calling, there were a few things that he did that I thought were really smart. First, he gets Skippy McGee in the game, right? This guy didn't have any experience. He's probably freaking out. First play they do, go deep. I love that, because if you got nerves or whatever, your first play, you back them up and you just throw the ball as deep as you can, because it's like the most risky play there is. So it's like, that's how you kind of get the guts out of the system. You do that. And of course, the key is not throwing an interception. So you'd say, if anything, throw it long. And he did. So nothing became of it. So I thought that, that was a pretty good play call. And I don't know, you thought the guy was not very good. My experience was, I mean, for who he was and how little experience he in such a big game, I thought he was okay. I think he completed, like 7 passes or so. It wasn't horrible.
I just didn't think the eyeball test, regardless of the stats, just looking at him play, I didn't think he did well today. And I wasn't expecting him to do well, being a freshman quarterback, not being that star quarterback, because DJ Lagway is also a freshman quarterback, but he's also Texas Mr. Football too, coming in, and one of the top, if not the top, dual threat quarterback coming out of the 2024 class going to Florida. And he goes down with the hamstring. I guess now that you mentioned it, the hamstring injury he went down with, bringing in Aiden Warner. and it just didn't show anything. In fact, the people who were sitting in front of me, I said, they're going to have to run it now because this guy doesn't have anything to offer. And immediately he didn't have much to offer. Now, it's not saying he doesn't have anything at all to offer because he did get off a pass or two, maybe three, but this isn't someone you're going to win with. And with the running game being what it was, as effective as it was, when it becomes too predictable because there's nothing to offset or keep them thinking about something else passing wise, you can load the box as they did. And you saw the running backs getting caught from behind the line of scrimmage and getting caught laterally, not really advancing. And then you said running up the middle, and there wasn't much there on occasion either.
Yeah. And the offensive line, I got to say, I thought those guys did a great job to pushing Georgia around. Number 58, I can't think of his name right now, but he's a kid from Jacksonville too. I think Trinity Christian, and he was really pushing some of those Georgia guys around. And, I thought they did an exceptional job, probably their best of the year as well. So a lot of promising stuff, but I'll say this about Skippy Aiden Warner McGee is he kept him in the game, and they got down and he brought him back. But
what options did he have? You had Graham Mertz, who's your number one quarterback. He's out for the season. You have DJ Lagway, who was definitely your number two. Now he's out because of a hamstring. Now you're going down the depth chart to the third string quarterback, who's also a freshman. How much more could you expect from a freshman at any time, red shirt or even true freshman? Looking back, even when Florida has been in that situation in the past, Chris Leak being a true freshman quarterback coming in, looked great in high school, Gatorade Player of the Year 2 times, I believe, in high school at Independence in Charlotte, comes to Florida, number one quarterback in the country. Well, actually, 1A and B because Kyle Wright out in California, who went to Miami, was A or B, and Chris Leak was either A or B. But anyways, he comes in, throws a nice ball, but you saw the huge difference between coming off a high school career into the SEC and someone with experience.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I thought Chris Leak, looked pretty good, and like you said, he was
a true freshman.
I thought he did. I
think he did too. As a true freshman, as the season went on, not in his first couple of games, he wasn't looking like. You knew the talent was there because he still had that nice ball. You just wanted to see how it played out. And in fact, the way his career really did play out, even with a championship won, I don't believe, based on what he was doing in high school and based on what the projection was of him coming out of high school and what he was supposed to have been, I thought he would have done even better at the quarterback position because that championship they ended up winning, it was he and Tim Tebow. And as I continue to say, since they won that championship, that team could not have won without Tim Tebow, and it could not have won without Chris Leak. You could not have one without the other. They both had to work pretty much in unison for that team to win that championship that year.
Great combo. Yeah, it was a great combo. It was great.
Excellent combo. And Percy Harvin kind of puts a little lid on it, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always said the case can be made the year Tebow won the Heisman. That could have been Percy Harvin's Heisman. I thought he was that good. What's that?
He was that good, but he was also that big a head case, and they talk about image as well as Heisman Trophy. He had a lot of issues even before he came to Florida. I think he was banned from sports in his last season, I believe, after the football season because of some issues he had there. So Percy Harvin, not looked at as a good guy off the field before he even came to Florida. And then when he gets to Florida, you hear these stories that are out there about him punching Chris Rainey, who was beloved on the team. And that doesn't go well with the team. But anyways, Florida,
I heard
Georgia,
he punched out a coach too. So
he probably did.
How do you get away with that? You have to be here's how you're as good as Percy Harvin. That's how you get away with punching out a coach.
And that's probably true because I don't think they win the national championship without him, specifically the big plays he made in that national championship game. But Florida loses 34-20. The line was 14.5. They beat the spread. So let's move on to I guess the biggest game of the day because, Florida wasn't a ranked team. Georgia is. Ohio State playing at Penn State. I took Ohio State. I expected Ohio State to win. They were a 3-point favorite. I took them at the 3 points. They ended up winning by, I believe, 7 points, 20-13. like I said, being at the Georgia-Florida game, I didn't get a chance to keep up with teams the way I would have liked to. I looked at my phone
Correction.
several times trying to keep up with what's going on in those games, trying to also conserve the battery as well, which practically died right after I got out of there. But Ohio State wins the game. I know if you watch the Sports Bag Bros podcast with Bias and I, he talked about how he didn't believe in Ryan Day as a coach for Ohio State and how he's faltered and has a lot to be desired. I'm thinking I'm in the camp of Ryan Day will get it together. I expect it this year in particular, only because Jim Harbaugh is gone and practically everything at Michigan's gone, offensively at least, from last season. The defense brings back 3 quality players. And I thought that, this would be his opportunity. It looks like it's set it up to be his opportunity. Definitely not the same Michigan team from last season. They lose to Oregon this today. They get blown out. But Ohio State now beats Penn State in Happy Valley.
Yeah, that was I'm sorry. I just wanted to jump back to the Florida thing for a little bit. I want to say Austin Barber was the guy I was talking about, number 58. He went to Trinity Christian. Okay. And it seems like there's a pipeline in between Trinity Christian and the University of Florida, because you've also got Trayon Webb, who is their second running back. And it seems like there's a lot of players being funneled down there.
Well, that's true. They're close to Jacksonville, obviously. Gainesville, only about 60 miles from Jacksonville. And Trinity Christian traditionally is a powerhouse in the state of Florida. Not so much this year because they're so young. This is the first time since I've been down here since 2000 that Trinity Christian has lost this many games. And if you watch some of these high school football shows on the weekend or on Friday nights, you don't hear their name in the top 10. They're not there this year. They started off there because I guess they expected them to be there because they always have. Coach Vernon Dormley has a very young team this year, and the way it's setting up, though, the experience they're getting this year is going to really help next season as they get back. I believe they'll get back to the ways of winning. This is just not the year they're going to do it. And, remember years ago, Jamie Harper came out of Trinity Christian, went to Florida as well. So they have that pipeline to Florida, but they have so many good players. In fact, I believe one year they had about 4 players in the ESPN top 300. So, and that's including, what was it, Kendrick Norton, a defensive lineman who ended up going to the University of Miami. So he didn't go to Florida. He went to Miami. And on top of that, he was the one who ended up losing his arm in an accident just a few years ago. And the Miami Dolphins kept him on the roster just so his medical could be taken care of. So he doesn't have an arm right now. Part of his arm is gone. And there was a story about that, but there's more details to it. But that was just keeping up with the Trinity Christian speak. You even had players going to Rutgers. Isaiah Washington, a wide receiver from Trinity Christian, went to Rutgers a couple of years ago. If you go to Rutgers as an offensive player, good luck. Outside of being Jawan Jamison, who came from Bowles, went up there to Rutgers not too long after Ray Rice, and he actually did very well. He came out early, ended up, I believe, going to Baltimore, but not sticking around much longer. But anyways, yeah.
And I mean, did Trinity Christian even exist when you moved to Florida? Because it wasn't around when I was in high school.
Oh, when I moved here in 2000, and my first experience with them was playing against Bowles at Trinity Christian, and that was a heck of a game. There was so much talent on that field between those two teams. And Antoine Sharp played for that team. He was a Florida guy. He ended up going to the University of Florida. His brother Brandon, in my opinion, was even better than he was. He ended up going to Louisville, and he was a safety that would knock himself out hitting you. So that was just a tremendous team they had. And for people here in Jacksonville, or if you keep up with high school football around the country, that's when Bowles was nationally ranked, not number 1 at that time, but certainly nationally ranked. And I believe it's around that same time they set the record at that time for the most players signing their letter of intent from one school. It was 14 back then. A lot of players from one team, a small team like Bowles. Corky Rogers, the late Corky Rogers, the Hall of Fame coach, the winningest coach in Florida State history, high school football history, was the coach of that team. Things have changed
Right.
since Corky has not been around. Bulls not winning championships as they've been known to do. Chipper
Right.
Jones, by the way, from there as well, playing baseball.
Yeah, over at Bowles. And I was going to say Jeff Pyburn, who plays for the Gators, is from Bowles. I saw there are actually 3 guys from Trinity Christian who are on there. It's Trayon Webb, Austin Barber, and one of their wide receivers. Now, speaking of Corky Rogers, let's give his true pedigree. He actually went to Lee High School, Mr. Lee High School.
Yes, he did.
Made his bones coaching there. Took us to the, I guess it was the state semifinals.
Leroy Butler.
Lost to Emmett Smith.
Edgar Bennett.
Leroy Butler and Edgar Bennett. And then he went to Bowles, and I don't think we beat Bowles again after that. When we had Corky, we would handle business with them, but yeah, once he got over there, that was kind of the end of our dominating them, and they really turned the tables on us. But yeah, Bill, and he coached like Mac Jones and all those guys over at Bowles. But yeah, he and I had weightlifting class with him, which is why I am in this incredible Hulkamania shape I'm in today. What's that?
Weightlifting or lunch?
Yeah, probably more lunch than weightlifting.
Yeah, I knew we had lunch together. I don't know about the weight room. Yeah. Waiting room? What were you waiting for?
It was a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away.
The waiting room? What were you waiting for back then? But come on, let's go back to this Ohio State game anyways.
Yeah,
being the team they are, beating Penn State. Yeah, I don't know if it's some kind of a bias I have against Penn State ever since Vinny Testaverde decided to play for Penn State that year, throwing balls to them and Shane Collins just picking him off one after the other. But they lost 20-13. I did take Ohio State because I believe Ohio State is the better team. Even though Penn State was undefeated, I did pick against them against USC because I guess I thought Penn State not being as good as I thought they were, or people thought they were. I thought USC was better than what they were, and they proved that they're not. And so I went with them, and Penn State beat them in California. Well, now Drew Allard, that's the quarterback that so many people have been on top of, and I just can't see it. I watch it, the eyeball test. I'm looking at what he does. I'm looking at the numbers. I go with the eyeball test more than the numbers when it comes to any quarterback. If you just want to go by stats, you can go by David Klinger years ago with Houston putting up these ridiculous stats and then turning out being a quarterback that's not worth a darn with the Cincinnati Bengals when he gets drafted. We've seen quarterbacks like that, players like that, but Drew Allard just doesn't pop out at me like that being a top quarterback as they're talking about now. He may be a top pick. He probably can with this lot of quarterbacks we do have coming into the NFL possibly in 2025. I just was not sold and still not sold on Drew Allard, even though 146 yards, you can look at that. That's easy to smack around. 12 of 20, that's easy to say. Look at the numbers. I'm talking about aesthetically, looking at him, watching him play. I just didn't see him just, being the elite person that they claim that he is. I guess because I've seen so many other elite players who came into the league. CJ Stroud was an elite player coming out of Ohio State, at least for the moment. Bryce Young was an elite player that it seems like Carolina missed on in a huge way. We've had elite quarterbacks come into the league. This past draft, Jaden Daniels looks like an elite quarterback on the rise, and even Caleb Williams, even though he's showing some inconsistency, looks like there's some promise there as well. I'm not seeing that with Drew Allard. And I don't know, Will Levis, another Penn State quarterback. I'm looking at him, a Penn State quarterback who did go down to Kentucky, but still, I look at him as kind of the same guy.
Yeah. I just wanted to correct you there. It's the Florida-Georgia game, not the Georgia.
Well, Georgia's the home team this year, so we went with Georgia, Florida. And besides, they've been beating on Florida long enough for Florida to understand that it's Georgia, Florida. And for people who probably need to know as well, the stadium, Everett Bank Field, where is the home of the Jacksonville Jaguars NFL team, they're renovating it, over $1 billion in renovations. So next season will be the last season, at least for 2 years, before Georgia, Florida comes back to Jacksonville. So next year in October or whenever this game falls on next year, this will be the last year for at least 2 years the game will be here in Jacksonville. They're going to split the games between Atlanta and Tampa.
Right.
So, yeah, and I know Jacksonville was talking about the economic impact it has here every year, which is extraordinary, and they need to figure out something to still have somewhat of an impact, even while the teams aren't here. I don't know how they plan on going on about doing that, or how it's possible. If they're playing in Atlanta one year or even Tampa, how does Jacksonville benefit for having something here that's going to make up for that 1 week of revenue coming in with that economic impact?
Yeah, I don't know. Bring
yeah,
the Blue Angels back for a second week. I don't know. That was pretty well attended.
Yeah, well attended, but people could watch that for free.
Yeah, but you go out to the base, and there's lots of places you can spend money out there. Mm-hmm. So it is free, and that's why so many people go.
Exactly.
But yeah, I don't know. I like seeing the Blue Angels. I like seeing, and obviously they have the F-35 this year. Well, speaking about the Ohio State-Penn State game, afterward, James Franklin was receiving some criticism. He got into it with one of the folks in the crowd, and they were saying that he's a good coach, but for these big games, he tends to not play up well against Michigan. He doesn't play well against Ohio State, which maybe if he's unhappy there, there'll be a warm seat waiting for him in Gainesville at the end of the year.
I'm hearing about those kinds of rumors about him coming to Gainesville, which can be interesting, but I think Lane Kiffin is even more interesting, a proven commodity offensively. It looks like no matter what you do at Florida, offense is still going to be what puts butts in seats. People love offense, and even if you have a great defense, Florida having offense is nothing unfamiliar, unless you have quarterbacks who make it unfamiliar like right now. And it's more because of the quarterbacks and quality of quarterbacks you have coming in. I also think that the way teams are structured now with NIL deals and these collectives that are fundraisers, practically taking these free agent players, high school players, college players, plucking players from other rosters, making real negotiations for players to come. Mike Sluka, a quarterback from Holy Cross, needs to be convinced he needs to be at UNLV with cash. Come on. And then you don't give it to him, so he leaves. And it's about the money. Don't congratulate your teammates. Don't tell your teammates good luck when you really couldn't care less. It was about the money and the only reason why you came, but it was up to them to hold their end of the bargain if that is what they had done. If that's what you had told him, it's up to them to live up to their promise, I guess. He was supposed to get, $3,000 a month or something like that, and he didn't get the money that he said he did get $3,000 a month, but he was supposed to get $100,000. They gave him $3,000 a month for 3 months, I believe, and that's it. And so he was short, so that's why he left. But it didn't matter because Hajj Malik Williams came in and picked up where he left off and done even better. And he's completing over 50% of his passes, which Mike Sluka wasn't doing. I believe he was under 50%, like 40 some odd percent, 44%, somewhere around there. He ran well, but so does Malik. He runs well. Hajj Malik runs well too. In fact, even better. So anyway, but this is where we're at with college football, college sports in particular. These collectives, they're like the hedge funds you talk about. These collectives are the new age college football deals. They're fundraisers, and even at today's game, they had a promotion of the Gator players who are on the roster right now. You know how they talk in between commercial breaks, and they have them on the Jumbotron. Support your school, support your team, student athletes. Put this money pretty much in the pot so we can go out and compete with these other schools who are doing a lot of the same. Miami has John Ruiz, the billionaire. He's the part of the collective, which is a huge part of the collective in bringing in those players that coach can secure. So this is what college football is right now. The smaller teams, well, they will be put out of it. And I still believe truly that we're getting closer to a mega conference where the SEC and Big Ten probably is where it's at. You're getting these other teams that are from other conferences, but you're getting the bigger and best teams out of there. The Pac-12 weren't great, but you bring in Washington, you bring in Oregon, you bring in UCLA, USC. Those are the top 4 teams there. Now they're in the Big Ten. You can leave all those other guys to waste, and they did just that. Oregon State and Washington State, the only schools in the Pac-12 as it stood last year. Now they're
the
going to be
Pac-2. The Pac-2.
they're the Pac-2, but now you have all these other schools going in there, I believe. San Diego State now part of the Pac-12 as of next year. And this year here, they're going to compete in the West Coast Conference basketball, I believe, to fill the void of the team they probably would have played as Pac-12 teams. So much to happening. But I wanted to keep it with today. Miami played. That's another team now. They're number 5. They probably will move up by default from number 5 because Penn State had lost. They'll probably move up to number 4. They're not skipping anybody. Miami played Duke today and struggled with them. They started like Miami has done so far this season. They start off very well. They kind of get the first few drives and things look good. The next thing you know, things don't look good anymore. They're up 14-0. Then, it's 14-14. Then they go into halftime, 17-14. And then it starts getting worse. But then Cam Ward, as he's been known to do, steps his game up. The defense steps his game up. Not the defense. The team steps its game up with the exception of the defense, which continues to get roasted. Miami was a 21.5-point favorite. I actually picked against them, which I typically don't pick my own teams, betting regardless of how easy or hard it may seem. And Miami ends up winning by 22 points. But so they covered the 21.5. I got them at 20.5, but it was 21.5 to start off with. But Cam Ward throws for 400 yards, 5 touchdowns and 1 pick. And he completed 25 of his 41 passes, looking like that top Heisman Trophy candidate because of the consistency, even though last week against Florida State, he didn't throw any touchdowns. In fact, our tight end, I'm a Cane fan, the tight end, Elijah Arroyo, threw the touchdown when Cam Ward did not against Florida State. So your Heisman leading quarterback is not throwing touchdowns, but your tight end is. I know it's one game and it's Florida State, and he more than made up for it today. I thought Duke would be a problem, and for one half they was. Malik Murphy, a transfer from Texas quarterback, he left Texas not because he wasn't good enough, but when Arch Manning comes in, you see your opportunities may be limited, so you might as well go where you might be needed. He goes to Duke. Manny Diaz, former Hurricanes head coach, former Miami Hurricanes defensive coordinator, went to Penn State as a defensive coordinator, now at Duke, signed up last, I think, December, and had them undefeated for a little while. Now they're, I believe, on a 3-game losing streak. But I expected Malik Murphy to be a pain in Miami's butt today, and he was for a little while until he wasn't. And Miami kicked it into that second or third gear and put up 53 points. The highest scoring team in the country, the most yards in the country, and the best 3-point conversions in the country. That's Miami. Defensively, a freaking mess.
Tight game up until about midway through the third quarter. And then, the offense really stepped on the gas. They turned it up. They got ahead by, a few possessions, and then they didn't look back after that.
Yeah, and Malik Murphy, even he started off with 2 touchdowns and no interceptions, but ended up with 3 touchdowns and 3 picks. So he's one of those dual threat quarterbacks. And I remember when he was a high school kid, I thought he would have his opportunity at Texas. And this is when Arch Manning, decided to go there. And it limited his options. And you saw how that was going to head. And so that's why he's at Duke. But I still think he has good ability. I think he's pretty good and has that potential to continue getting better. Now, being elite, I don't know. We have to wait and see. We today's age, you have a lot of these dual threat quarterbacks, pretty much running backs who throw the football. But then you have those special ones who can do both of them pretty similar. And Bryce Young, I thought he was that kind of player at Alabama, and he turned out to be more of a passer than he was a runner. He came across, at least with Alabama, I guess, surrounded with that type of talent. He seems cerebral to me. I don't know if it's the chicken or the egg when it comes to what he's doing in the NFL now. And I mean, is it Carolina being that bad, or is he just another bust who went number 1 overall?
Yeah, never doubt the possibility that as horrible as Carolina looks, David Tepper can actually make them worse. He seems to find new lows all the time. So that guy is, he's the eternal abyss, basically, if you're an NFL football team. And we're lucky, I think we're lucky because we have Shad Khan, who I think is, he's not a football guy, but having a football guy like David Tepper thinks he is can be your worst enemy. Whereas, I think Shad, defers to the football people. So I think that's fortunate. I wanted to say on the NIL front, I was talking about Carson Beck has an NIL deal of $1.5 million. The car he has, Lamborghini. So Athens is like a southern college town, but
Yes.
I saw some headlines
close enough to Atlanta though.
Right, but definitely different. You would expect to see a Lamborghini in Atlanta or Miami, but in Athens, it's kind of sticks out.
I bet it does, and the chicks keep coming. Even though I don't keep up with this pop culture nonsense. I know it's some new hot chick that he's been dating over the past like 3 months or before the
so
season
you
started.
Keep up with it. I see.
Yeah, I don't keep up with that nonsense. I mean, for what reason?
I know you got a subscription to Tiger Beat. You can confess.
I wish. No, I don't even wish anymore. If I was 25, I would have wished. But right now, it doesn't make any sense anymore to me. Because I got to doing this show late, I didn't do any show prep. I don't really do show prep anyway. My show prep is watching games. That's the show prep. And going to the game today and trying to keep up with scores and trying to see what leading stories are, that was made fairly difficult because the game in front of us turned out to be a pretty good game. So couldn't do too much of that. But as I see right now, I'm looking at the scroll, Louisville beating Clemson at the moment. In the beginning of the fourth quarter, 26-7. That's a surprise. I thought if you were on the gambling side, take the over. I thought the over would be in play because I didn't think that Louisville could stop Clemson. And Clemson, if they were going to stop anybody, they could slow down Louisville. But apparently, none of that is working out for Clemson. I thought outside of Miami, Clemson would have been that team. And after what Miami had just done with Louisville previously, scoring a lot of points between the two of them, I thought Louisville was ready to kind of go down to Clemson. Apparently not.
Your squad, South Carolina, a couple of scores up on
Texas A&M.
On Texas A&M, right?
My squad. How'd that end up? My squad.
My mom is from. When they came here for the Gator Bowl, you were like, "I love those guys," and then you went.
Oh yeah, that's the reason why I went to watch them play.
They beat the Gators, right?
And that's why I went to that game, because I went to the Gator Bowl. They played Notre Dame. They ended up losing to Notre Dame, but I was sitting with a bunch of South Carolina Gamecock fans, and they were like the coolest people ever. I was like, man, come on now, this is they're all influencers. Could they influence me in terms of being like a Gamecock fan for that day? And it doesn't hurt that it's Notre Dame out there, who I don't like anyway. Ever since Catholics and Convicts, I haven't liked them, so it didn't hurt. And they did lose to Notre Dame, even though they were ahead, and then ultimately lost the game. And my mom is from South Carolina, or was from South Carolina, so that held a special place. And I hadn't been there since the early 80s. So I told him, I was like, "Yo, so what's the deal?" He's like, "Hey, just come up to a game." So I found a game, and I ended up going to the game. And it happened to be against the Florida Gators. And the reason why I took that game, because I figured that South Carolina had a pretty good team this year. So the Gators are pretty down this year, and it was Graham Mertz's first year. I figured they would beat them. So let's go watch a Gator game on the road and watch them lose. Only to, never mind.
Wait, what's the end of that story? I'm hanging on the edge of my seat.
I'm just saying here.
The Gators won, right?
Oh, yeah, Gators won the play from behind with that crowd. That crowd was, it's almost felt like the Gamecock players should have been disappointed to let that crowd down. That's how great a crowd was. That's a crowd you could feel legitimate energy from. And they lost. They came from behind to beat South Carolina in that game. Ricky Pearsall proved to me that he was the best player on the field. That's why I called him. I made a video, Sports Bag Bulls podcast. I made a video about Ricky Pearsall being he shouldn't have gone in the first round, but he may be the best first round pick. Right. An overrated first round pick, pretty much.
After getting shot,
but now he got shot.
Yeah, but he's playing now. He's playing.
I heard about play. Yeah, he's supposed to be playing. What, this week coming? Tomorrow?
I thought it was last week, but I'll take a look.
Well, you know what? The fact that he can play.
Spectacular after getting shot in the preseason.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Kind of like the guy for the Commanders did, Brian Robinson.
Yeah, Brian Robinson. Robinson, coming out of Alabama, was, I believe, carjacked and shot, missed a few games, came back. It's ridiculous, the society we live in now. and the knuckleheads who are out there with the guns. Now, it becomes political. Get rid of the guns. The guns aren't doing the damage. The idiots with the guns are doing the damage. It's craziness, but that's what it is. But Brian Robinson, another one of those players, but Ricky Pearsall, just happy as hell to be able to play another day, because there've been players in the past who had been shot, like Shane Curry from the University of Miami playing with the Indianapolis Colts. I think a 15-year-old kid shot him and killed him in the parking lot of a parking spot. That was years back, but this is just another example of a player getting killed by a gun and not having an opportunity to play again. Heal up and come back to play another day. Ricky Pearsall is a player who's playing another day. Brian Robinson is a player who's playing another day. And one of these intriguing games, even though I would like to keep it with the top 25, at least right now, because those games are pretty interesting. Guess who owns the state of Alabama? Vanderbilt. They beat Auburn and Alabama this year. Get out of town, man. They beat Auburn in Auburn, 17-7.
Yeah, they won't be singing. They won't be singing "Sweet Home" this year, will they?
Sweet Home. They'll be singing "Stay Home." But look, Peyton Thorne. I never thought he was a good quarterback. Anyway, it looks like I'm always insulting someone's quarterback. But when you watch him play, you feel insulted. Peyton Thorne is from Michigan State. Michigan State hasn't really put out any good quarterbacks anyway. Kirk Cousins is probably the last of the Mohicans over there. But and he did have going by the numbers, at least, he was efficient as hell, 20-29, 239 yards. He had one touchdown, but you lost to Vandy. Now, I don't even think we could look at that and ridicule it and saying you lost to Vandy. Vandy's a pretty damn good team this year relative to past Vandy teams, and even for just being a team this year. And I still think, like I've thought before, Diego Pavia is the difference in Vanderbilt being as good as they were. I was on that Diego Pavia bandwagon 2 seasons ago when he was at New Mexico State. If you look at some of the videos on Biases and Eyes past shows, I've mentioned Diego Pavia, and I wish he would have gotten an opportunity to play against bigger schools. And I didn't think anything else. I was like, man, he may not ever see the light of day on an NFL football field because he's playing at New Mexico State. Little did I know that he ended up going to Vanderbilt. And when I was about to pick the Vanderbilt-Virginia Tech game, I saw he was the quarterback of Vanderbilt because I did take Virginia Tech. They were playing at Vanderbilt in the beginning of the season. And I said, I'm taking Vanderbilt now. Once I saw that Diego was there, I was like, that's the reason why I'm taking Vanderbilt. And what happens? Vanderbilt ends up beating Virginia Tech. Some people thought it was that one-off that you get early in the season. Everybody's still rusty. College teams don't have preseason games, so the kinks in the armor are there, and it gets better as the season goes on. Then they beat freaking Alabama. Now they went to Auburn to beat Auburn. We're talking about a team that has a real argument to be in the playoffs. Now, I know that's BS, but come on, it's Vanderbilt. Give them a pass.
So who's the best Vanderbilt quarterback before Pavia?
Jay Cutler.
Jay Cutler. Do you think he's that good?
No, Jay Cutler was that good.
No, do you think Pavia is that?
He'll
have an NFL career.
No, he'll have an NFL. I'm thinking he will have an NFL career. He strikes me as a player who's, in my opinion, just watching him and seeing how he plays, he reminds me of Stetson Bennett. Yeah. Stetson Bennett just happened to play on Georgia with all of these ridiculously talented players on the team with him. And man, you can't help but love Stetson Bennett and being the underdog, his whole story. And for him to just go out there and do it again, even though the first time it was the defense, but he still was a huge part of it. And then seeing him in his second year, it was a lot of him. And, it was Brock Bowers, it was Ladd McConkey, but man, he certainly had made a name for himself. And the reason why he went so low in the draft to the Rams is, well, he's old, at least older. If he were just another one of those 20, 21-year-old guys, he's going in the second round probably.
I just wanted
he's a little short.
I'm about to sign off, Trav, but I wanted to say one thing about Ricky Pearsall is that tomorrow will actually be his third game, and he's getting a lot of opportunities because Ayuk is out and Juwan Jennings is out, and Deebo Samuel is pretty backed up. So, yeah, he got healthy. He's getting healthy at just the right time when they really need him. So he's going to have a good opportunity there.
I hope he does live up to something because I had going into the season, I was going to have him as my rookie of the year. And then when this nonsense happened, well, I went with Ladd McConkey, who's starting to bubble up a little bit now, got his first 100-yard game this past week. And I just like Ladd McConkey's story because I know that he was a big Tennessee fan. He ended up going to Georgia instead. And he was the one that was the biggest pain in the butt on the scout team against those guys who were those 5 first-round draft picks on defense and those 13 picks overall in that draft. He was going against the majority of those guys. So he's tough as hell. And when he got his chance, we see what he turned out to be. 2 consecutive years. And his toughness, because he did have that injury in his senior year, and he still was able to, suck it up and help the team out.
All right. I'm out. Have a good night.
And why are you leaving so soon? Okay, yeah, I'd rather have you gone.
Exactly. Take it easy, man.
All right, man, beat it. Yes, I'm back again, but I won't be here much longer because there's some things going on in college football right now that we just need to talk about and touch on. Not too many, because this was outside of those premier games. This was a relatively nondescript day for college football. Luckily, I was able to fill the void in the afternoon going to the Georgia-Florida game, which turned out to be an exciting game. I was on the Georgia side, so that was cool. Georgia fans are just cool. I wish I was a legitimate Georgia fan. I'm serious. I'm a Canes fan. I always will be a Canes fan. And if I'm not a Canes fan, hey, I'm an Ivy League fan, believe it or not. I like Princeton. I like Columbia. I like those teams. I don't know what it might be, the quintessential student athlete thing, but I just love Ivy League football. Ivy League football, the true student athlete. But let's move on to the number 1 team in the country, Oregon, beating up on Michigan in the Big House. Oregon, I tell you what, I think I might have disrespected them because they're a West Coast team, even though they're now in the Big Ten. There's a little bit of bias if you're an East Coast person or East Coast me, and there's a California team or West Coast team. There's a bias there, just like there may have been a bias in the 80s and 90s when it came to rap. There's a bias there in football as well. And I think it extends to the Oregon Ducks. So I'm not always picking against them on purpose. I believe I make my point when I pick against them, and I'm right a lot of times. I've been wrong, especially with the Ohio State game. But with Michigan, I had a feeling they were going to beat Michigan because after that Ohio State win, and even after the Purdue win, even though Purdue isn't a great team, the fact that Oregon shut them out, and that was the first shutout they had in years, it shows that Oregon's there for business. I mean, they're looking to do some serious things, and hey, I'm actually happy for them, even though they are a West Coast team playing in the Big Ten. And I don't know, Dylan Gabriel is the one I wasn't sold on completely. You know how it goes. If you don't know how it goes, there's always these quarterbacks that you have every year that either the media is pushing or someone is pushing harder than others to make them better than what they are. I don't know if I really thought that way about Dylan, because I do remember he was at UCF, the University of Central Florida, and then he went to Oklahoma. Now he's in Oregon, and I think maybe I'm a bit turned off about these players of today, and I guess that we better get used to it. Going from school to school hopping. It seems every player is up to their 3rd school these days. But regardless, he's putting up the numbers and he's getting respect based on the numbers and getting wins along with that. And they're playing quality teams, and he's showing up against those teams. So give credit where credit's due. Today, 254 yards, 294. Look at it. I'm going blind out here. What do you want? 294 yards and 1 touchdown for Dylan as they beat Michigan in the Big House 38-17. But Michigan has several issues of their own. Their quarterback situation is just god awful. It's horrible. Dave Warren is the newest horrible quarterback to come in, and he's barely getting over 50% of his passes completed. 164 yards. He did get 2 touchdowns. I didn't watch the game, so I can't be as critical based on just numbers, because I just said earlier, you don't want to get caught up with just numbers. The eyeball test can tell you a lot. You can look at numbers anytime and try to make something out of them that may not be what they really are. I mentioned David Klinger from Houston years ago, putting up ridiculous numbers, but goes to the Cincinnati Bengals and doesn't do anything. Andre Ware put up ridiculous numbers at Houston once again, goes to the NFL and doesn't do anything. And I know we're looking at these college players and how effective they are as college players. And that's what we should do. We shouldn't just project and say this guy isn't good because he won't be good in the NFL. Let's just say this guy is not as good as a collegiate player as other people think he is. That's it. It should be left at what he's doing in college, not his projection into the NFL. But looking at what these players like Drew Allar, who I've spoken about already from Penn State, seeing what he's doing at Penn State and watching the games, well, and I also don't want to be one of these people who says if he didn't have this player, he wouldn't be that good, because that's every quarterback, that's every player. Come on, it's a team sport. You take it for what it is, and you see the players and you take the entire body of work. You can't mix and match because that's not football anymore. You can't run with 10 players because you took one player out. Or if this player chose to go to Penn State, in this case, Ty Warren, who I'm looking at as that huge tight end that's really helpful for Drew Allar and any quarterback who were to go there. He's just a phenomenal big-time target, 6'6", over 260 pounds. Come on, I compared him to Kyle Brady, a former Penn State tight end who was nothing more than an offensive tackle, and a good one at that, who happened to catch the ball every now and then. And he also dropped a few key passes every now and then as well, kind of meaning that he should have probably become a tackle. You know, did Brickashaw Ferguson play for Virginia years ago? He was 260 pounds for like forever until he went to the NFL. He gained weight, and he was a dynamic offensive lineman at 160 pounds. And he was 160 pounds. He played as a freshman, and he moved on and continued to play until he went to the NFL, played with the Jets, ends up being one of the best Jets offensive linemen ever. And he started off at 260, stayed there forever, and gained weight once he got into the NFL. So, yeah, I'm saying that to say a tight end can gain a couple of pounds, probably stay the same if you're a bigger tight end, like Ty Warren is for Penn State, a 6'6" guy who could probably put on 10 pounds and still be just effective as a tackle as he is at catching the ball as a tight end. It's always a benefit if you have a tackle and a tight end rolled up in one who knows how to block on those sweeps and seal the edges. Those things you need to do as an offensive lineman. So, yeah, that's a whole lot of things to talk about today that I've already spoken about. And I'm looking at people coming in and they haven't commented yet. So I think I'm going to shut the show down. Other than Scott the G coming in, what else? Any parting words that I want to pass along before I get out of here? It seems that South Carolina is still up by 10. They have the ball in the fourth quarter against Texas A&M in Columbia, South Carolina. A nice home game for South Carolina. They do have defense, if nothing else at all. I was not sold on their quarterback Sellers, but I am sold on their defense. Maybe Sellers has gotten better because he did have a good game against Alabama in Tuscaloosa, almost winning the game there, but they didn't. Louisville still playing Clemson, and Clemson still up 26-7. Surprisingly, Clemson, I thought at number 11 was pretty much coming down the stretch they come, looking more towards Miami, maybe in this ACC championship game. That's what I was thinking. And going down the list even further, it's now going into the fourth quarter. Tennessee is up 21-10 against Kentucky. And a game I thought that would be closer and more exciting, SMU at home against Pitt. After what Pitt had done to Syracuse last week, picking off Kyle McCord 5 times, taking 3 of them to the house. I guess they used up all their turnovers for a season in that one game because they're getting beaten 34-3 in SMU. But SMU has turned out to be a pretty damn good team themselves this year. So we talked about Miami, and we do have to talk about a little bit going out the door. Iowa State in Ames at home they lose to Texas Tech 23-22. So Iowa State is no longer undefeated. But guess who is still undefeated? Curtis Rourke came back, and Indiana really puts it on Michigan State 47-10 in East Lansing. So Indiana's for real. Coach Cignetti, I know he gets a little bit of flack for the things he says and the way he's going about getting his players, which isn't any different than the way other teams go about getting their players today through the transfer portal. And if you could throw any of that NIL money out there, you do that as well. So I don't know what the hate is about or what the discussion is about. Also, we look at number 19, Ole Miss, beating the living daylights out of Arkansas, 63-31. Take the over if you knew in advance. 94 points scored in this game. Another team in the top 25 we need to talk about out of respect and out of need. Army beating Air Force 20-3. The game was very close for quite some time. I think going into halftime, it was 6-3. Army was up, and then they pulled away. They win 20-3. And now that Commander-in-Chief trophy will be decided between them and Navy when they meet in December in the best rivalry in college football. And now that's just me saying it. I think a lot of people do believe that it may be the best rivalry in college football because I still have Yale and Harvard, the game, as one of the best rivalries as well. But I certainly do believe Army-Navy is the best rivalry, even though I do love that Iron Bowl, Alabama and Auburn. And I do respect the game between Ohio State and Michigan. A lot of rivalries out there, but some of them just stand up on their own accord. And the game played on Friday, which was yesterday, November 1st, Boise State. Let's not forget about Boise State. They beat San Diego State as they should have, 56-24. But if you're talking Boise State, you know what it's all about. It's about Heisman Trophy candidate and maybe leader in the Heisman Trophy race, Ashton Jeanty, 149 yards for him. But the caveat, I guess, 4.8 yards a carry. Pretty basic, pretty normal, below average for the man who once was averaging over 10 yards a carry for a season and was knocked down a little bit to 9.9 yards a carry before this game. Now definitely knocked down even further after this game. But he did get his 149 yards. He did carry the ball 31 times. He did get his 2 touchdowns. And I think he is number 1 on the Heisman list or number 2, because I think there were 3 guys and they're fairly interchangeable between Travis Hunter from Colorado, between Cam Ward from Miami, and Ashton Jeanty of Boise State. One or the other. And I think Travis Hunter, in terms of the things he's doing and the stats he's had and the impact he's had, should get a nod, but he's missed games because of doing what he's doing. And I think when you miss those games, regardless of why you're missing them, it probably affects why you should or should not be the Heisman Trophy candidate. Well, you could be a candidate, but the winner. So if you want to look at it just for players who play every game, and I believe, I don't want to just say Ashton Jeanty being the running back that takes a beating, because he hasn't really been taking a beating when you're averaging over 10 yards per carry for the better part of the season. But he does take a beating because that's what running backs do. Travis Hunter, as a wide receiver, he takes a beating at the line, but he makes his plays. He gets his big and large yards per reception, and then he plays cornerback. Man, he does everything, and he's doing all of it full-fledged. There isn't any part-time to it. So that's why even with a game missed, or even if it's multiple games, well, not to a degree, but to a degree, he needs to be in the argument. But if I had 2 people to really point out right now, it's still Ashton Jeanty. Cam Ward, he's in, he's out, because after not having a touchdown last week against Florida State, I'm giving him the side eye, and then I'm bringing in Travis Hunter. But then he puts up 5 touchdowns and gets 1 pick today against Duke, but it is Duke. Even though this isn't your daddy's Duke, it's still Duke. And it's still the ACC that's not doing much of anything this year. But Miami's doing what they have to do necessarily, and that's win. And you can't fault a player or a team for doing the winning that they're supposed to do. If they're losing to these bad teams, that's one thing. Even struggling against bad teams, that's one thing. They're still getting the win. They're finding a way. Now, I have different thoughts on when they finally face a quality quarterback, there's going to be an issue. Not someone like Malik Murphy who could run and really give you something to think about and still pass. I'm talking about someone who could really pick you apart when the opportunities are there, when your defensive line, which normally gets after people, isn't getting after people anymore. And then that secondary, even when the defensive line is getting after the quarterback, that secondary is still giving up those big plays like I saw at Florida State or against Florida State when I was in Miami last week. So there's enough rambling. The show is about to come to the end. If you've come this far, don't forget the Sports Bag Bros podcast with Bias and myself comes on Mondays and Thursdays. I do a little editing here and there, so I may put it out on that Monday, sometimes just on that Tuesday. And guess what? I do get lazy, so Wednesday and Thursday is also an option for the previous Monday's show. So for those of you who joined me, suckers for not joining me. Scott the G, thanks for joining. I'll catch you next week for week number 11. Did I say 11? Week number 11 of the College Football Review. Until next time.